Aurora Sinclair smoothed down her crisp white blouse and adjusted her blazer as she strode through the gleaming lobby of Pinnacle Enterprises. At 28, she was the youngest senior account manager the prestigious advertising firm had ever hired. Her heels clicked purposefully across the marble floor as she made her way to the bank of elevators, nodding politely to the security guard. As she rode up to the 37th floor, Aurora mentally reviewed her packed schedule for the day ahead. Client meetings, campaign pitches, endless emails to wrangle. She thrived on the fast-paced corporate world, relishing the challenge of climbing the career ladder in a competitive industry. Aurora had always been driven and ambitious, laser-focused on her goals since childhood. Growing up in a modest suburb of Chicago, she'd worked tirelessly to earn scholarships to an Ivy League college. After graduating with honors, she'd landed an entry-level job at a small ad agency and quickly worked her way up, hopping to progressively larger firms. When Pinnacle had headhunted her 6 months ago, Aurora knew she'd finally arrived at the big leagues. The elevator dinged as it reached her floor. Aurora strode out, her mind already shifting gears to the day's tasks. She greeted her assistant, picked up her messages, and settled in at her desk to tackle her overflowing inbox. The morning flew by in a whirlwind of conference calls and strategy sessions. Around 1 p.m, Aurora's stomach growled, reminding her she'd worked straight through lunch again. She decided to run down to the sandwich shop in the lobby to grab a quick bite. As she waited for her order, Aurora's phone buzzed with a text from her boyfriend Mark. "Can't wait for our date night tomorrow. Miss you, babe." She smiled and typed back a quick reply. Mark was sweet and stable, exactly the kind of dependable partner she needed to balance out her hectic work life. They'd been dating for nearly 2 years, and while Aurora wasn't quite ready to settle down yet, she could envision a comfortable future with him someday. Order in hand, Aurora headed back to the elevators. As she approached, she noticed a handsome man in an impeccably tailored suit waiting there as well. He looked to be in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and striking blue eyes. There was an air of quiet authority about him. The elevator arrived, and they both stepped in. As the doors closed, the man turned to her with a warm smile. "Going up?" he asked in a rich baritone. "Yes, 37th floor, please," Aurora replied politely. He pressed the button for her floor, then the 42nd for himself. "Ah, you must be with Pinnacle. I'm actually heading there myself for a meeting with the CEO, Josiah Reeves," he said, extending his hand. "I'm on the board of directors." Aurora's eyes widened slightly as she shook his hand. Josiah Reeves was practically a legend in the advertising world, a self-made billionaire who'd built a global marketing empire before semi-retiring to pursue philanthropic ventures. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Reeves," she said. "I'm Aurora Sinclair, Senior Account Manager." "Please call me Josiah," he replied with a disarming smile. "Senior Account Manager at your age? Very impressive. You must be the rising star I've been hearing about." Aurora felt a flush of pride at his words. "Thank you. I've been fortunate to have some great mentors along the way, although I still have a lot to learn." "Nonsense. I'm sure you're already teaching the old guard a thing or two," Josiah said with a wink. "The industry needs more fresh talent like yourself to shake things up." They chatted easily for the rest of the short elevator ride, discovering they shared a passion for modern art. As they reached Aurora's floor, Josiah's eyes crinkled warmly. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Aurora. I have a feeling our paths will cross again soon." As Aurora exited the elevator, she felt a small thrill run through her. There was something magnetic about Josiah's presence, an effortless charm combined with razor-sharp intelligence. She pushed the thought from her mind and refocused on work, but found herself smiling for the rest of the afternoon. Over the next few weeks, Aurora found herself running into Josiah with increasing frequency. He seemed to be spending more time at Pinnacle's offices, sitting in on high-level meetings and offering strategic guidance. Each time they crossed paths, Josiah would greet her warmly and strike up a conversation. He always seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and ideas, making her feel valued in a way few others did. Aurora found herself looking forward to their brief interactions, enjoying the way Josiah challenged her intellectually. One evening, Aurora was working late to finish a crucial presentation. Most of her colleagues had already left for the day when Josiah appeared in her office doorway. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked with a sympathetic smile. Aurora looked up, startled but pleased to see him. "Just trying to get ahead on this campaign pitch. The client's a tough one to crack." Josiah's eyes lit up with interest. "Mind if I take a look? Maybe a fresh perspective would help." For the next hour, they pored over Aurora's work together. Josiah offered invaluable insights, helping her refine and elevate her ideas. His brilliance was evident, but he never made her feel inferior. Instead, he drew out her own creativity, pushing her to think bigger and bolder. As they wrapped up, Aurora felt a rush of excitement. With Josiah's input, she knew her pitch would blow the client away. "Thank you so much for your help," she said earnestly. "I can't tell you how much I appreciate it." Josiah waved away her thanks. "It was my pleasure. Your talent is extraordinary, Aurora. I hope you know that." His intense gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary. Aurora felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with professional pride. She cleared her throat and began gathering her things. "Well, I should probably head home. It's getting late." "Allow me to walk you out," Josiah offered. "I was just leaving myself." As they rode the elevator down together, Aurora was acutely aware of Josiah's presence beside her. The air felt charged with an unspoken tension. When they reached the lobby, Josiah lightly touched her arm. "Would you like to grab a nightcap? There's a great little wine bar around the corner. We could continue our discussion in a more relaxed setting." Aurora hesitated. It was an innocent enough invitation, but something in Josiah's tone hinted at more. She thought of Mark waiting at home and knew she should decline. But the pull she felt toward Josiah was undeniable. "That sounds lovely," she heard herself say. "Just one drink, though. I have an early meeting tomorrow." The wine bar was cozy and intimate, with low lighting and plush velvet booths. As they sipped expertly paired vintages, Aurora and Josiah's conversation flowed effortlessly from work to art to travel. She found herself opening up about her childhood dreams and future aspirations in a way she rarely did with anyone. Josiah listened intently, his blue eyes warm with genuine interest. "You're truly remarkable, Aurora," he said softly. "Your drive, your passion, it's captivating." Aurora felt herself blushing at his words. "You're not so bad yourself," she replied with a coy smile. "I have learned so much from you already." As the evening wore on, their body language shifted almost imperceptibly. They leaned in closer, hands brushing accidentally as they reached for their glasses. The air between them crackled with attraction and possibility. When they finally left the wine bar, Aurora knew she was treading on dangerous ground. But the exhilaration coursing through her veins drowned out the warning bells in her mind. "May I give you a ride home?" Josiah asked, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Aurora nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As they slid into the back of his waiting town car, the sexual tension between them was palpable. Josiah's thigh pressed against hers, sending shivers through her body. When they reached her apartment building, Josiah walked her to the door. For a moment, they stood facing each other in charged silence. Then Josiah leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. Aurora knew she should stop this. She had a boyfriend. Josiah was on the company's board of directors. This could jeopardize everything she'd worked for. But as his lips met hers, all rational thought fled. The kiss was electric, igniting a passion Aurora had never experienced before. She melted into Josiah's strong embrace as he deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "I should go," Josiah said huskily, though he made no move to leave. "You should," Aurora agreed. Then throwing caution to the wind, she grabbed his hand. "Or you could come up for a nightcap." The next morning, Aurora awoke with a mix of exhilaration and guilt churning in her stomach. Memories of the night before flashed through her mind. Heated kisses, roaming hands, bodies intertwined. It had been the most passionate, intense encounter of her life. But in the harsh light of day, the reality of what she'd done came crashing down. She'd cheated on her loyal, loving boyfriend. She'd slept with a member of her company's leadership, potentially jeopardizing her hard-won career. What had she been thinking? Aurora's phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Good morning, beautiful. Hope you have a great day at work. Love you. Fresh waves of guilt washed over her. Mark deserved so much better than this. She resolved to end things with him as soon as possible. Continuing their relationship after her infidelity would be cruel and unfair. At work, Aurora threw herself into her projects with renewed vigor, trying to push thoughts of Josiah from her mind. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw his piercing blue gaze and felt the ghost of his touch on her skin. For the next week, Aurora managed to avoid running into Josiah. She told herself it was for the best. What had happened between them was a mistake, a moment of weakness. It could never happen again. But late one evening, as she was leaving the office, Josiah was waiting by her car in the parking garage. Her heart raced at the sight of him. "Aurora," he said softly, "we need to talk." She nodded stiffly, unlocking her car. "Get in." They drove in tense silence to a nearby park. As they walked along a secluded path, Josiah finally spoke. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted. "I know the other night was impulsive, but it meant something to me. You mean something to me." Aurora's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. "Josiah, we can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "It's wrong on so many levels. I have a boyfriend. You're practically my boss. If anyone found out..." Josiah gently took her hands in his. "I know, believe me, I've gone over all the reasons this is a terrible idea. But I can't deny how I feel about you. There's something special between us, Aurora. Don't you feel it too?" She did feel it, a connection unlike anything she'd experienced before. But the practical side of her brain screamed that this was career suicide. "Even if I did, it doesn't matter," she said, pulling her hands away. "We could both lose everything." Josiah's eyes blazed with intensity. "Some things are worth the risk," he said. Then he kissed her, pouring all his passion and longing into it. Aurora's resolve shattered. She knew she was making a huge mistake, but she was powerless to resist the pull between them. As Josiah's strong arms enveloped her, she surrendered to the inevitable. Over the next few months, Aurora and Josiah carried on a clandestine affair. They stole moments together whenever they could. Hurried encounters in his office after hours, secret weekend getaways to his lake house, stolen kisses in empty conference rooms. The secrecy and risk only added to the passion between them. Aurora had never felt so alive, so desired. Josiah awakened parts of her she never knew existed. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just going through the motions. She was truly living. But the guilt and fear of discovery weighed heavily on her. She'd broken things off with Mark, unable to keep up the charade any longer. The pain in his eyes when she'd ended their relationship haunted her. At work, Aurora was constantly on edge, terrified someone would discover her secret. She threw herself into her projects with manic energy, determined to prove her worth beyond any shadow of doubt. Her colleagues remarked on her increased drive, assuming she was gunning for a promotion. Little did they know, Aurora was fighting to hold on to everything she'd worked for. If her relationship with Josiah came to light, she knew she'd be the one to pay the price. He was too valuable to the company to lose, but she was expendable. As weeks turned to months, the strain began to show. Aurora was exhausted from living a double life, constantly looking over her shoulder. She and Josiah argued more frequently, the stress of their situation taking its toll. One night, after a particularly heated fight, Aurora found herself wondering if it was all worth it. She loved Josiah, but was love enough to justify potentially throwing away her entire career? The ambitious part of her that had clawed her way to the top rebelled at the thought. Josiah sensed her pulling away and redoubled his efforts to show her how much she meant to him. He surprised her with thoughtful gifts, whisked her away for romantic weekends, and showered her with affection. But Aurora couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship was built on quicksand. The breaking point came during a company gala. Aurora and Josiah had agreed to keep their distance at work events to avoid suspicion. But after a few drinks, Josiah's hand lingered a bit too long on her back as they chatted in a group. His gaze held hers with unmistakable heat as he complimented her ideas. Aurora saw her boss's eyes narrow as she observed the interaction. Panic flooded through her. She abruptly excused herself and fled to the bathroom, her hands shaking as she gripped the sink. What was she doing? She was risking everything she'd worked so hard for. And for what? A relationship that could never truly work. Josiah was 20 years her senior, with an ex-wife and grown children. Even if they went public, the scandal would destroy her professional credibility. She'd always be seen as the young gold digger who slept her way to the top. In that moment, Aurora made her decision. She loved Josiah, but she loved her career and her independence more. She couldn't keep living like this, constantly looking over her shoulder and compromising her values. With a heavy heart, Aurora left the gala early and drove to Josiah's penthouse. When he arrived home later that night, she was waiting for him with tears in her eyes. "We need to end this," she said softly. "I can't do it anymore, Josiah. It's killing me." Josiah's face crumpled in pain. "Aurora, please. I love you. We can find a way to make this work." She shook her head sadly. "No, we can't. Not without destroying everything else in our lives. I'm so sorry, but I have to choose myself." They talked for hours, alternating between passionate pleas and resigned acceptance. In the end, they both knew Aurora was right. Their relationship had been doomed from the start. As dawn broke, Aurora gathered her things to leave. Josiah pulled her into one last embrace. "I will always love you," he whispered fiercely. "You've changed me in ways I never thought possible." Aurora's tears flowed freely as she kissed him goodbye. "And I'll always love you," she replied. "But sometimes love isn't enough." In the weeks that followed, Aurora threw herself into her work with renewed focus. The pain of ending things with Josiah was raw, but she channeled it into drive and ambition. She came up with bold new campaign ideas that wowed her clients and earned her a promotion to creative director. Josiah kept his distance, respecting her wishes, but sometimes she'd catch him watching her from across the room at meetings, his eyes filled with wistful longing. It was bittersweet, but Aurora knew she'd made the right choice. As months passed, the ache in her heart slowly faded. Aurora began to rediscover who she was outside of her relationship with Josiah. She took up painting again, a passion she'd abandoned in college. She reconnected with old friends she'd neglected. She even started cautiously dating again, though no one could compare to what she'd had with Josiah. 1 year to the day after ending their affair, Aurora ran into Josiah in the lobby of Pinnacle Enterprises. Her heart skipped a beat at the sight of him, but the pain was duller now, more of a bittersweet ache than the sharp agony it had once been. "Aurora," Josiah said warmly, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's good to see you. Congratulations on the Anderson account. I heard your pitch was brilliant." "Thank you," she replied with a genuine smile. "It was a team effort, but I'm proud of what we accomplished." They chatted easily for a few minutes, catching up on work and mutual acquaintances. As they talked, Aurora realized how much she'd grown in the past year. The raw, desperate passion she'd felt for Josiah had evolved into a quieter, more mature form of love, one that could appreciate what they'd shared without needing to possess it. As they said their goodbyes, Josiah hesitated for a moment. "Aurora, I just want you to know, I'm grateful for the time we had together. You taught me so much about myself, about what really matters in life. I hope you've found happiness." Aurora felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I have," she said softly. "It took some time, but I'm in a good place now. I hope you are too." Josiah nodded, a wistful smile playing at his lips. "I am. Take care of yourself, Aurora." As she watched him walk away, Aurora felt a sense of closure wash over her. Their relationship had been intense and transformative, but it belonged to the past now. She was ready to embrace whatever the future held. Over the next few years, Aurora's career continued to flourish. She became known as one of the most innovative minds in advertising, earning industry accolades and the respect of her peers. But more importantly, she found a sense of balance and fulfillment that had eluded her before. She traveled the world, both for work and pleasure, soaking up new experiences and perspectives. She mentored young women entering the industry, determined to help them navigate the challenges she'd faced. And slowly, she opened her heart to the possibility of love again. At 33, Aurora met Daniel, a kind and brilliant architect who challenged and supported her in equal measure. Their relationship developed slowly and steadily, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. When he proposed 2 years later, Aurora said yes without hesitation, knowing she was choosing a partner who truly complemented her. On the morning of her wedding, as Aurora prepared to walk down the aisle, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought of the driven young woman she'd been, so focused on success that she'd nearly lost sight of what truly mattered. She thought of Josiah and the passionate, tumultuous love they'd shared, and she thought of the person she'd become, still ambitious and determined, but with a deeper understanding of herself and what she wanted from life. As she took her father's arm and began the walk to her future husband, Aurora felt a profound sense of gratitude. Every experience, every triumph and heartbreak had shaped her into the woman she was today. Her affair with Josiah, as painful and complicated as it had been, had taught her invaluable lessons about love, integrity, and staying true to herself. Aurora met Daniel's eyes as she approached the altar, seeing all the love and promise of their future reflected there. She knew that this steady, nurturing love built on honesty and mutual growth was what she'd been searching for all along. As she spoke her vows, Aurora silently thanked every person and experience that had led her to this moment. She was no longer the young woman willing to risk everything for a forbidden passion. Instead, she was someone who understood that true love empowers you to become the best version of yourself. Later that night, as she danced with her new husband surrounded by friends and family, Aurora caught a glimpse of her reflection in a mirror. She barely recognized the radiant, self-assured woman smiling back at her. Gone was the frenetic energy of her younger self, always striving for the next achievement. In its place was a quiet confidence, a deep-seated knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the years passed, Aurora's life continued to evolve and grow. She and Daniel welcomed 2 children, finding new depths of love and purpose in parenthood. Her career reached new heights as she eventually became CEO of her own boutique advertising agency, known for its innovative campaigns and ethical business practices. Occasionally, Aurora would think back to her time with Josiah. The memories no longer brought pain or regret, but rather a gentle appreciation for a pivotal chapter in her life story. She hoped he had found happiness too, wherever life had taken him. On her 40th birthday, Aurora stood on the balcony of her home, looking out over the city shed once been so desperate to conquer. She felt Daniel's arms wrap around her from behind and leaned back into his solid, comforting presence. "Happy birthday, my love," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Any profound thoughts as you enter your 5th decade?" Aurora smiled, covering his hands with her own. "Just gratitude," she replied softly. "For this life we've built for our children, for everything that brought me to this moment, even the difficult parts." As the sun set over the skyline, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Aurora felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had learned that life rarely went according to plan, that the most profound growth often came from the most painful experiences. Her journey, from ambitious young professional to a woman caught in a passionate but impossible love affair, to the balanced and fulfilled person she was today, had been full of unexpected twists and turns. But standing there in her husband's arms, with the sounds of her children's laughter drifting up from inside, Aurora knew she wouldn't change a thing. Every step, every mistake, every heartbreak had led her here, to a life richer and more satisfying than she could have ever imagined. As she turned to join her family inside, Aurora sent a silent thought of thanks to her younger self, and to Josiah, and to every person and experience that had shaped her journey. She was no longer searching for fulfillment in external validation or forbidden passion. Instead, she had found it in the quiet moments of a life well lived, in the love she gave and received freely, and in the knowledge that she was, at last, truly and completely herself.